Hi there, I'm Sajeesh Sahadevan, and this is part two of our discussion with Stephen Mann and Alan Berkson. In part one, we discussed some key data points from the State of AI in IT report. If you haven't watched it, I'll leave a link in the description. If you have, let's join Alan and Stephen.
Over to the next interesting question. Someone from the team suggested a question around which areas of the business would you like AI to not penetrate? And this was, we asked this to both IT folks and employees. And Stephen, Stephen loved the question. So, Stephen, why don't you go ahead first and see if some of the answers align with your thought process?
Well, in some respects, if it was me answering the question, and depending where I was in my organization in terms of AI exploitation, I'd start off at the point of ticking everything or checking all of the boxes, and then maybe become a little bit looser over time as I become more confident in terms of what it can and cannot do and where the key risks are. So again, for me, there was no right or wrong answer, although I did have preconceived ideas that sort of came true in terms of where most of the no-go areas were, whether it be related to the top one, the ethical side of things, or many of these are people related as well, whether those people are employees or customers, and in some ways it is a case of trying to balance risk and reward. What sort of risks are involved if the AI gets it wrong versus the reward if the AI gets it right. And again, we need to split between the heavy lifting and the heavy thinking, because one of the things that I think we've moved on from now is that when we started talking about AI, and I think for me that was around about 2016, people were talking about the Terminator and Skynet and all that stuff, and we probably didn't know any better, but some of that concern still needs to remain, that if we are using AI to make decisions that relate to legislation, and for some reason the AI gets it wrong, then the impact of that is potentially massive, or the risk associated with it, even if it's a small probability, if it's a high number, probably a financial number that goes along with it, it's still a massive risk. So I don't think we're ever going to get away from the ethical and legal option or response being high up there. And again, some of that, is it what people really think, or is it what they think they need to think, because it's something that gets talked about a lot. The people management one for me was really important to be in there, that I think as individuals, whether we've experienced it firsthand or whether we've just read or heard something related to maybe CV screening using AI to work out who goes through from the initial applications to the next stage, that it does make you wonder, how accurate is that? It's probably no different to the olden days, where you might be sifted out based on what you currently earn versus what the job currently pays, but it's still something that I think we're always going to be overly sensitive about, whether it be recruitment or performance management or anything related to us as individuals within the organization. The one that I thought should have been higher was the business data and IP. And I don't know whether I'm being influenced by some of the stories around ChatGPT and people using it in a work context and putting in what is ultimately sensitive data that then becomes part of the ocean of data that then gets offered up to other people. I'm waffling again, so throw it over to Alan, because he's probably got a much quicker route to explaining some of this.
Sure, let's go.
No, thanks, Stephen. Thanks. The word I think the common theme here is autonomy, and this represents how people feel about how much autonomy they're willing to give to technology. My definition of AI is not artificial intelligence, it's automated intelligence. It's not reasoning, it's not critical thinking, it's not empathy, it's not creativity, all the things that we ascribe to people. Particularly the first three, I don't want my technology having autonomy, complete autonomy over engaging with or making decisions about these things. They say you won't be replaced by AI, you be replaced by a person augmented by AI. And
Right.
And I think that's what some of these no-go areas represent, some directionality for vendors to think about, how do I help people address these issues better, but I can't expect that they're going to actually just completely outsource the process. So the handling sensitive data, business data, there was a recent article about how Google broke ChatGPT by using the word poem like hundreds and hundreds of times until it started spitting back actual data that was within that and some of it was private data, some of it was so there's some challenges on the technology side. I think those will be solved, but the first three are actually not surprising to me at all. When I first saw customer relationship management, I'm like, wait, they're using AI in CRM all over the place, but it's not the relationship management. And I think that this is really about, I don't trust AI to completely handle interactions and or decisions about people.
Mm. And I think one thing that's worth me saying as well, just to try and remain balanced, I've spoken about AI making bad decisions. We shouldn't forget that people make bad decisions as well, that people recruit the wrong people.
Absolutely.
People don't necessarily run the performance management process as well as they can do in terms of recognizing those people who have done far more than probably was expected on them. So I think in the cause of balance, it's worth me throwing that in too.
Well, and I'll counter that, Stephen. There's an illusion of control. I could fire the person who made a bad decision, but can I fire the AI that made a bad decision? And I don't know. That might be a little tougher.
Right. For that matter, the government, let's say a president is a human being. Their decisions are tinted by their biases, their view of the world. And it's never perfect. Just thought experiment. If it was an AI and it was programmed to be perfectly ethical, which is not binary, I understand, but it had access to all the historical events and information, and and it was programmed to make a highly logical decision. Would you trust that AI bot over a human being that might not align with your ideologies or thought process?
I'm going to throw in a very old reference. There was a movie called War Games many years ago, and I think the answer is that if it really understood all the options, it wouldn't be able to make any decisions because it's so complex. In the end, just for anyone who hasn't seen it, War Games there was a simulation of nuclear war, and there was a computer that said we can't even do it because there's no way to win. And so it stopped playing the game when it realized there was no win scenario. And I think that a highly evolved, as you would say, would probably not be able to make any decisions because there's no right answer.
Right. Go ahead, Steve.
I wasn't about to talk, but I was trying to mull something over in terms of do you trust the AI or do you trust the human? Because on the one hand, you'd like to think that the AI can look at far more data sources and data and have a far richer interpretation of whatever the issue is, and therefore has got more chance of coming to a better conclusion based on the data. But then, to me, somebody was chatting to me a couple of months ago about the difference between data-driven and data-informed. And that's the bit that worries me, that you can offer a data-driven solution or answer, but can it take on board all of the data and then use something a little bit more human, shall we say, to work out what the best answer actually is? Because I think that's where a lot of the concern comes from. And I think it's somewhat represented in what Alan was saying with war games, that you need that. I think Alan used the word empathy earlier on, and making it. I suppose it's the difference between making a difference between your head and your heart. That you can make a hard-nosed decision with your head, but the right decision might actually have to come from the heart. I'm thinking out loud, which is dangerous, unfortunately, but that's where I'd got to in terms of the original question, Sajeesh, that I want to say that it's probably because I'm a mathematician at heart, that I'd want to go with the technology that has taken more data and crunched it and come up with something that hopefully is logical, but then I know as a human being that whether it's something as simple as not buying the cheapest thing on Google because you don't trust the website that's selling it, you just think that's too good to be true. Factoring that sort of thing in, such that you can apply some judgment, I guess, to the data or whatever insights have come from the data. I told you it's dangerous when I think out loud.
but yeah, I think like the answers that both of you provided, essentially something that Alan said really resonated, and I think that distills down what should happen. So AI might not replace humans, but AI might be able to augment human abilities, right? So essentially, someone who's got a finger on the war button, or got access to nuclear weaponry, might rely on AI to understand the consequences, or to play out simulations and try and predict the future on multiple scenarios. But essentially, if I guess the answer is, you don't let an AI decide and give it full autonomy to take a call that might be ethical or legally questionable. But it helps if you have access to all the data in a very synthesized format, and then you make a call as a human with your head and your heart aligned, which I think perfectly sums up what the best scenario might be. That brings me to before we move on to the next one, while we were talking something before I lose my train of thought, I'd like to talk about an interesting answer that Claire Agater recently gave on a webinar when asked about whether AI would steal your job. And I've known people polarized about this question, and Claire gave what in my opinion is the perfect answer. It depends on what you do for a living, right? So there are certain things that AI would replace, like let's say there might be some mundane aspects of your job that you hated doing anyway, but you had to do. AI can come in and replace that, which frees, let's say, most creative job and white collar job, and over time even blue collar labor is taken over by AI. According to Sam Altman, there would always be something that humans would do, right? Like it's our inherent need to stay relevant and uh, use our intelligence and creativity or our capability in general to create something or to keep working on something. So yeah, to throw a question back at both of you, barriers to AI adoption. We didn't ask whether it's going to whether you're worried whether AI is going to steal your job for obvious reasons. But what are some of the jobs that would be taken away, and what are some areas where AI would be the perfect co-pilot, so to speak, to a human being uh, that would essentially make decisions a lot more ethical, legal, and more sound.
There's a cliche about the buggy whip business is struggling right now. If you were in a horse and buggy so technology has outpaced that. I have a framework that I use when I look at the future work. I think it's simple, complicated, and complex. Simple is a recipe. Complicated is parking a car, and complex is raising a child. If you want to take a look at whatever you're doing for your job, and if looking within that context, if it's simple, if it has documented steps that can be repeated, if it's complicated, which means it's not just one step, but it has dependencies. Parking a car is not easy, but technology can get close to doing it. There are exceptions. But complex is the domain of humans, for the foreseeable future. Critical thinking, empathy, creativity. These are all inherently human qualities that technology is not even close to. So being able to, communication or those types of jobs, if your job is basically knowledge management, where your job is to regurgitate something that's already been done or summarize something that's going to be done, that's pretty easy to do from a technology point of view. But if you looked at that slide with the no-go areas, if your job is managing people, if your job is making strategic decisions for your organization as opposed to the tactical execution, if your job is creative, thinking about what's next or coming up with something new, those are the skills and the jobs that are more likely to thrive. But we also don't even know what the next jobs was, because at the for the Industrial Revolution, nobody knew that there'd be someone called an IT service management analyst who'd have a website that talked about it, right? So there's some new jobs and new roles that will pop up.
Got it. And on the creativity front, Sam Altman said something interesting. It's very hard to predict the future, and but basically, when forced to think back to a time when he was starting out, or they were trying to put together the LLM. If you were to ask him at that time what kind of jobs would AI replace, he would have started with blue collar labor, truck drivers and so forth, and heavy machinery operation. And then he thought AI would probably not be able to get to some of the complex scientific and mathematical areas. So, for instance, proving a mathematical theorem or coming up with a new science law or things like that, or writing code, that he didn't think AI would get there. And the last frontier for AI that he thought at that time was creativity. But what's happening is creativity, at least unless you're super creative, a lot of creative and when I say creative, I mean content and art as well, right? Highly complex art is being created by AI. AI is yet to we get to see self-driving cars that are completely autonomous, right? So the reverse is happening. Uh, uh, in terms of what he thought would happen, it's creativity, and now we probably might be getting closer to solve certain math theorems that have been that mathematicians have been grappling with for decades, and perhaps at the very end we'll have cars and trucks that drive completely autonomously without with no risk of accidents or very low risk, which might be happening. Like it might be reducing uh, the number of accidents, or the percentages of accidents might be lower versus when a human drives it. But as long as that number is significant or non-zero, people would still uh, not trust the AI, because like if the steering wheel is in my hands, I trust myself more than maybe a bot. I don't know.
I'm
Like
going
it could
to I'm
be
going to give you a little bit of a sideways example. I read a LinkedIn post. I wish I could attribute it here. It was a vendor that made robots to help load boxes in warehouses, and they were selling it based on the rate of the number of boxes per minute or whatever that it could load. And after the utilization of it, they realized the customer wasn't getting that rate, but they were happy. And like, wait, so we sold you on getting a certain rate, you're getting a lower rate, but why are you happy? Someone figured out, well, let's have the robot only do the heaviest boxes so that
right.
people didn't have to do it. So the heavier boxes were slower. So they were getting a slower rate, but someone made the decision that I'm going to take this automation technology and only apply it to a certain part of the business, which will make our employees happier because they don't have to lift the heavy boxes. They do the light ones and the easier stuff, and the robot will do the heavy lifting, literally. Right. So there's automation that replaced some stuff, but but at the same time, someone had to decide where to put it. And that's the creativity.
Exactly. That's perfect. And Stephen, what about you? Like what jobs do you foresee AI taking away in the future versus augmenting?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a second, because I think there were two interesting things that I had to write them down so I didn't forget them, came out of the ongoing conversation. And the first is, in terms of the no-go areas, just going back to the interpretation of responses, or in terms of interpreting the question again, when some people answer this, they'll think of it. So if we take people management as the example, that the AI does like 90% of the people management, but for other people, it might be 20% of the people management. So coming back to what Alan said about augmenting people with the technology to make them better versions of themselves. So again, I think we've got the potential for some vagueness in terms of the different interpretations of what the question is asking and what the answers are stating as well. And then the second thing, I really like the bit about the AI having a road accident, because the way we would likely react to that is that if I was driving and I unfortunately ran Alan over and injured him, I think that we would have a different response to that. We just say, I'm an idiot or a bad driver or whatever, but it'd still be confined to me as an individual. But if the AI driven car ran Alan over, then it would be AI's bad. And I'm not quite sure what the answer is yet to that, but to me, it was just an interesting thought that appeared.
The answer is no one should run me over.
Yeah, sorry, Alan. I don't know whether I chose you alphabetically or what then, or maybe I just subconsciously wanted to run you over. I don't know. But I do think that, there's something in that. In fact, I know what it is. It's because I watched Orange is the New Black last night, and it was an episode where one inmate ran another one over. So I got that, I think, at the back of my mind. So I think there's some variables here that will definitely influence how AI is adopted. And in the same way we were talking earlier on about, are we looking to use AI to improve employee experiences? Are we looking to use it to reduce costs or to get faster or to scale up? There's all of these factors that will come into both individual and ultimately collective decision making around AI. So coming back to the actual question though, Sajeesh, in terms of the types of jobs, I think it will differ based on industry. That's one of the things that we haven't spoken about yet in terms of this data, that different industries might have different interpretations as to what they're comfortable with or what they're driven to do. Perhaps, if you want to look at it from a cost saving perspective, that some industries might want to forge ahead with people management just to remove management from, or the management, or to thin out the management layer within the organizations, whereas other industries won't. So I think we can't discount that affecting things. And the whole idea about creativity as well is one that I haven't quite got my head around, because if I think about when I'm creative, or at least I think I'm creative, a lot of the time isn't necessarily plucking something out of the air that's, well, imaginative to start off with. It's normally taking two things that are all and crashing them together, and it produces something new. So in some respects, I could see AI being more creative than people in terms of being able to do that. It's a bit like with the AI driven car scenario. In many ways, if we're really trying to exploit technology, would you actually still use cars? It's a bit like the Henry Ford, although allegedly he didn't say it, about if we asking people
faster horses.
Yeah, faster horses. Yeah. So I feel like I'm dodging the question, but I think the honest answer is I don't think there is an actual answer that we don't know. Alan sort of pointed it out, going back to the Industrial Revolution, that we just couldn't foresee where technology and automation was going to take us. And even, you're not old enough, Sajeesh, but Alan and I, when we were kids, and I'm assuming, Alan, because you look young, but we didn't have mobile phones. We definitely didn't have the internet, let alone access to AI-enabled capabilities in many of the things we use on a day-to-day basis that we don't even know is powered, or at least supplemented by AI. So trying to predict the jobs that are actually going to go is really, really difficult, in that I still like to think there'll be more augmentation of people than there will be replacement of people. And it's a little akin to, if we come back to cars again and manufacturing plants, that I haven't seen it firsthand. I've just read about it, that where the automation was going to replace the people, it actually encouraged the employment of more people. And it might not add up, but who's to say we're not going to see a similar thing with AI, that we might just need different types of people rather than fewer people or more
Steve,
people.
I want to address your creativity question, because you said that you take two things or a bunch of ideas and mash them up, and technology can do that. If I took 4 different sources on the future of ITSM and said to generative AI, can you write an essay using all 4 of them as a source, it could write 50 essays.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the best one? You can decide that, because you have the the creativity. You're going to look at them and say, this one doesn't quite catch the essence of it, or this one is missing some key points, or this one is not going to resonate with the audience. That's your critical thinking and your creativity that is delivering value, as opposed to, look, AI can create infinite variability, infinite content, infinite images, but are they all good? Are they all useful? Are they all have value?
Yeah. See, I always said that was more human validation rather than creativity. But that's just me coming at it from a content creation perspective.
Right. Your human validation is creativity. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Right. And there's also some merit to prompt engineering, although it started out as this buzzword. But if if you try to create an image on Dolly or one of those tools, you try to include some text within the image, it'll always mess it up, right? And AI, while creating an image of a hand, it'll always mess it up. It's got something to do with, training data. So essentially, it looks at a bunch of faces. It basically is able to align where the features go, what's the difference between, or what's the distance between, the corner of your eye to the tip of your nose. It tends to get that right, but in the training data, hands are always at weird angles, right? Sometimes some of the fingers are obscured, some you're holding something. It tends to get it wrong more often than not. Likewise with text on an image. So Vijay, the Atomicwork CEO, apparently spent a lot of time tweaking the prompts, and like he took it as a challenge, and he was somehow able to get the AI. I don't know how. Like maybe we can get him on one of these, one of the future episodes, and try and understand how he cracked it. But eventually, he was able to get that right. So I agree with you on some level, Alan, where the human essentially, as we know AI today, can basically make it do things or make it produce outputs that are more refined, slightly better, and give directional inputs into as to where it needs to go to get closer to a valuable output. Uh, Over time, it might be it might be more intuitive about what's right and what's wrong based on training data. What we see today is also based on I forgot that term. Yeah, based on reinforced learning with human feedback, essentially, right? So over time, we might see it get better. Okay, moving on to the next. Uh, so, so essentially, we surveyed about 750 end users, non-IT employees. Essentially, we'll go over what the responses are, but let's look at the business functions and the frequency with which they contacted IT, at least in the last 6 months, which we believe would fairly accurately, people would be able to give a fairly accurate answer based on their memory. Most of the respondents were in customer support, and that included customer support and customer success. Uh, Along with sales, and then marketing, product, and some of the other departments were less than half of the participants. Uh, Now the other, the second pie chart to your right is more interesting, where we had 25% of folks who had contacted IT more than 3 times in the last 6 months, and 30% folks who contacted IT twice at least. So I think we got a good mix of people who have contacted IT enough number of times to be able to answer some of the upcoming questions fairly well. The first one of these was, well, this is not really pertaining to contacting IT so much as using AI tools like ChatGPT. Presumably, most of this is ChatGPT because of the number of participants who had heard about ChatGPT was around 70 odd percent, and at the second place it was Bard, which was single digits. And what we noticed was that 75% of people agreed to have used ChatGPT or a similar use for their work at least once. Uh, Stephen, what was your take on the data? Were you surprised at all? What are some of the concerns that you have around it, and like what do you think can be done?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple angles on this for me. I wasn't surprised at all that people are using free AI tools for work. If it makes their lives easier, if it makes them smarter versions of themselves, or if it maybe gives them insights that they wouldn't have got otherwise, that they're all good reasons to use it. But that's I guess the glass half full view of it. The glass half empty view is that if these people are hopefully more productive, hopefully more beneficial to the organization by using these free AI tools, then surely they should be better enabled by the IT organization in using maybe the corporate version of the AI tools, whether that be for consistency, security, or any other factor. So for me, this is expected, but it's still troubling that if you think about, I mean, we had Steve Jobs earlier on the slide, and the iPhone in 2007, which actually was 2 years later than the first use of the consumerization of IT, where we as employees decided that we needed more than the IT organization was giving us, whether it be devices or software, or more recently personal cloud services, that we wanted more in order to either, I say, be better versions of ourselves, or just to keep up with what the business is asking us to do. And that was probably nearly 20 years ago now, isn't it? And we've gone from that, and people will talk about shadow IT and maybe even shadow cloud, and we're once again hitting the cusp of what is the IT organization going to do to provide people with the capabilities they need, or at least think they need, to do the job that's being asked of them. And at the moment, they're going out and using free AI tools. Whether that's a good or bad or indifferent thing, we can talk about in a moment. So, I really want to get to the bottom of what the disparity is between those people or those employees who are using AI tools based on their own initiative, and those that are doing because it's actually a encouraged part of what they're doing, that whether it be just their line manager or whether it be company policy, that you should be using a certain type of technology to work 10% faster, or to come up with 10% more output, or whatever the differentiator is. One of the interesting things, actually, just going off at a tangent, which is my gift, is that combining this information but through the number of help desk or service desk IT support contacts data, was that those respondents who had contacted the service desk, or whatever the in-house capability is called, more than 3 times, were actually using AI tools by about, I think it was about 10% more. I mean that 10 percentage points rather than 10% of 19, so 28, 29. And again, we don't know the reasons why, but it's interesting to look at the potential causality, and I know correlation does not imply causation, but it's interesting that is there a link between people's affinity to using technology, which could be construed by the number of times they contact IT support, and how they're currently picking up AI tools and running with them, whether they're meant to or not. I feel like I'm waffling about this now again, which is my gift, as I keep saying. But for me, there's an awful lot of insight here, which ultimately boils down to the business, or the people that work in the business are wanting or needing to use AI for work, rightly or wrongly.
Right.
So what are we going to do as IT organizations to at least keep up, if not surpass where they want to be, provide them with things that they probably never even thought of.
Right. And in order to help IT teams understand what employees use these tools for, we asked them that question, and we'll get to that in a minute. Before that, Alan, what's your take? Help us understand, what this means. Were you surprised at all? And what can IT do to make this free AI tool usage safer?
This is the shadow IT problem in a nutshell. But it's not, is it a problem? The 75% of users are looking for new ways to help them do their job. And what are the low-hanging fruit of the most useful or valuable applications? The challenge that IT organizations have is, if they went to those 75% of users and saying, what value are you getting at it? It would take them 6 to 12 months to be able to bring that into their organization within their existing tools, or finding new vendors and getting policies in place, and privacy and security and governance. So
Exactly.
it's a risk, but it's also an indicator that they have people within their organization who are currently trying to find better ways to do their job. It could be something as simple as just I want to write better email responses to my customers, so I'm using ChatGPT. Or I want to create an executive summary of a document. Then you start to get into privacy issues. So, if I'm a vendor, I want to make sure that I'm putting out free tools that showcase the value, the longer term or the bigger value of whatever I'm trying to deliver, because 75% of users of these IT end users are going to try it, right? So that's encouraging. But if I'm the IT leadership within the organization, then I'm concerned that there's some issues here. But I think it's not as big a deal. This has been going on for a very long time, and I think we survived it, so we'll continue to survive it.
Got it. Like Stephen mentioned, we went from shadow IT to shadow cloud to now shadow AI. Let's look at what they're using ChatGPT for, just to expand on what you said, Alan. And does this data put your mind at ease, or is it more unsettling for you now?
Oh, no, this is spot on. I mean, this is what I'd expect. The problem solving, I don't know that's a little bit weird in the question. Creative ideation and problem solving, I'm not sure about the problem solving side. I maybe we'd have to dig into more of the actual, how the question was asked or what they understood about that. But the creative ideation, email drafting, content, market research, this makes a lot of sense. I would think content summarization might have been higher. I think more people are doing that, and that should be a concern for organizations, because that's when they're putting up stuff in a public free chat GPT or whatever that may be problematic going forward.
Yeah, and with the content summarization as well, we don't know the relative breakdown of the roles where people need to summarize content. So for all those roles or people in roles that don't need to summarize content, that 27% might actually be 100% of the people that need to do it. Again, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate with some of the numbers and just trying to work out what it actually means. And with the creative ideation and problem solving as well, again, you can read it and think, well, you're asking for the answer or you're asking for something new, but it might just be, you might just ask ChatGPT, tell me 20 things that other organizations have done to blah, blah, blah. And it throws out 20 and you might think, well, yeah, 2 of those are actually quite interesting. Or if we combine those 2, then we've actually got something that, but the important thing is you've got to that point quickly, and you might not have got to that point before. But then again, you can play devil's advocate and say, well, you've shortcut the process. Have you actually spent a significant or a sufficient amount of time understanding the problem? I think there's an Albert Einstein quote, isn't there? It's something like, if I have an hour to solve a problem, I spend 59 minutes thinking about the problem and then 1 minute solving the problem. Again, he probably didn't say
something
it,
like probably Abraham Lincoln talking about, if I had 5 minutes to chop a tree, I'd spend 4 minutes sharpening the axe or something. Like, I won't be surprised if Albert Einstein said something along the lines of, and a more intellectual version of that versus a physical activity. But yeah, it makes sense. But one thing that you said, Stephen, let's say me or someone from my organization is asking ChatGPT about 20 companies that might have done a certain thing. If you go back or forward in that timeline, right, maybe 10 of those 20 companies have not publicized the data about them doing the thing, but their employees might have asked a similar question again, and ChatGPT now knows that this company is strategically trying to do something in this realm, and and spit out that information, and because it used that questioning prompt to train its data models and language models. So yeah, essentially, we asked whether, so one of the options was coding, which included code generation and testing. We are glad that that was further down this list. That was only 17%, but that doesn't discount certain edge cases for quite a few of these options that that might be questionable and that might potentially lead to customer data or business strategy or even IP loss, or leakage rather. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the coding part, because this is one of the conversations we had with the raw data, was that we were asking people in non-IT roles, so we needed to work out who was actually doing the coding, and engineers might be, because that was considered non-IT. It's open to debate, but I think the largest proportion of roles were actually marketing, I think, from memory, weren't they? That
exactly. And some of the use cases might be to quickly build an integration between two applications, or the front end or the back end of the website, tweak the front end or the back end of the website, or maybe embed a form or something within the website, and they don't know how to do it. They pick the code from ChatGPT. It's a possible use case. As a marketer, those are some scenarios that pop into my head. Could be some other edge cases as well. Just throwing this this quote from Gartner out there, that by 2030, every dollar of IT spend will have an AI component. And I think, like, we've in some way covered why we think so. And I think that should act as a wake-up call for the 10 or 12 odd percent companies that are not thinking about investing in AI. Sooner or later, you'll have to. The sooner you start, the longer you will have to learn, fail, and work your way around the potential failures and security risks. So, Alan, Stephen, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining in. This was a great pilot episode, or the first episode for the series, and hopefully our audience and the IT community is going to take away a lot of practical insights from it.
Thanks for having me, Sajeesh. This was great. Thanks, Stephen.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
So those were some of the insights from the State of AI in IT report. To download the full report, check the link in the description. And to stay updated with future videos, subscribe and click on the button again to enable all notifications. Bye for now.